Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. So good to see all of you here with us today. Good to see Dr. Whyte, my
Good to see you
co-host.
as well.
Always good to be here with you. And as you guys know, we are doing part 3 on depression because you guys had amazing questions last week, and we wanted to get to those questions and want to hear more of your questions because we're the co-hosts, but you guys are part of this program as well with your comments and your questions. And as you bring people here to this program, we just really appreciate you and want to say welcome to you wherever you are. So I didn't even check. Oh man, is there no Clint today? I don't think I see Clint.
Yeah, and I think it was last week that he warned that he wasn't going to be with us, right?
I don't remember, but maybe it's Veterans Day. He's taking the day off. He's taking the day off even from Mental Health Monday. But anyways, we love Clinton. Uh,
Absolutely.
yes, he's been so
Shout out
faithful
to you, Clint.
for sure. But hi, good evening, Patricia and Cherise. Let us know where you guys are watching from.
And
And
Agnes.
and Agnes, yeah, good evening to you. Please share this link on your social media and invite your family and friends to join us because we are discussing a topic that affects everyone. There's no
Absolutely.
one in one way or the other. You are affected by depression, sad thoughts, feelings, emotions, all types of stuff. We're all affected by this in one way or the other. Oh, there he is. Clint's like, I'm here. Clint, Clint, I
Good to
hope
see you,
Clint,
Clint.
put a 1 in the chat if you're coming to the convocation because I really need to meet you in person.
Seriously.
Dr. White and I both need to meet you.
Seriously.
So I hope you're coming. I really do. I hope all of you will come. Okay, we have Cherise. Okay, and for Virginia, again, welcome. And then Veronica. Veronica, I think you're from Washington State because you're one of our regulars too. I think. I could be wrong. Brenda from Prospect, Tennessee.
Oh, he said he's been here and he doesn't know why we didn't see his comment.
We didn't see his comment or his name or anything. Aw. Well,
Oh,
we'll
yeah, that's
see.
not
You,
cool.
you see, Clint, we didn't know you were here and see all the nice things we said about you and we missed you. See, you never know what people are saying about you.
I had a feeling he was here. I just had a feeling, I was like, he's getting this message somehow.
Yes. Okay. So we had David from Palm Springs. Welcome, David. Happy to have you here on Mental Health Monday.
From my neck of the woods.
Oh, and Clint said he's not coming to the convocation. Clint, you just broke my
Oh,
heart.
no. Oh, no. That's really sad. Clint, we're
Oh,
so sorry to hear that.
maybe the next year because we do plan to do these
Maybe next year.
yearly. Okay. All right. He said LOL. He's laughing. We're serious though. We're serious.
Good.
All right. So, again, good to see all of you. Hopefully, your Monday has been good. Mondays can, like we say, can be very, like they say, manic Mondays. My Monday was very full. I
Yeah.
mean, lots of clients, lots of stuff that had to be done, but I had energy. And that's what makes that
Well,
what
that's the key. That's the key. I mean, I love how we tend to adapt and overcome. Like, you know what Monday's going to be like. You get your process, you get your routine, and
Mhm,
especially when you get a great team that you're working with, it just can make it all just tolerable. No
mhm,
question.
mhm. And when you love your job.
That helps tremendously. That
When you
helps.
love your job. So, and I think we wouldn't go into mental health if we didn't love what we do. So I can say, I know I love what I do. And even when I don't really feel up to it, the clients give me energy. They give me energy, or I just get another perspective when I'm sitting with them, even if I'm going through something. So,
You're so right, though. Like sometimes you're so stressful and all this is
yeah.
going on, and there's conflicts about this and billing issues and, stress. And then you get in front of the client and everything else just kind of fades to
Yeah.
black, and and it changes everything. It changes
Yeah.
everything. So you're absolutely right.
Yes, it does. Just want to remind everybody, please put in the chat your questions and comments. I don't know if we saved some of the questions from last week that didn't get asked. I don't think we did. I remember Amber said you can screenshot it, but I didn't do it. And I don't I
I
don't know.
didn't do that. I
I
didn't
don't
do
know if she did it either. So if you had a question from last week, Maybe if you have a new one, of course, but if you had one from last week that you had posted, but it didn't get answered towards the end, please put it in again. Or if you have a new one, again, thank you. We want to be able to answer your questions about depression. It's such a big, um, it's just such a big thing when emotions and feelings of sadness just seem to sometimes come out of nowhere, and then sometimes there's circumstances that bring that on. But other times with different disorders, sometimes our mood can just switch without really anything going on, but you're still just sad.
So I think part of what we want you to see is the complicated nature of depression.
Hmm.
And just when you start looking at what the causes are, there can be so many things contributing to depression. So that's definitely what we want you to walk away understanding.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I think last week, did we leave off with like loss and grief? Did we talk about, is that what we left off on?
I don't think we left off on it, but it could have been the next thing that we were about to go
Talk
to.
about,
Yeah.
well, I gotta shout out sincere condolences to the Campbell family
Good.
who lost their patriarch to cancer. He was
Yeah.
a very, very good friend of mine. Did you know him?
I didn't know that, Ricardo. I didn't know you kn You know what? His sister Stacy, we were roommates at Pine Forge at 14 years
Wow.
old. She was my first freshman roommate. So, and Andre, he was a junior. So Pete had already gone on. So he's a little older than I am.
I
So
got you.
I didn't know. I knew of him and I saw him, but I
Right.
didn't know him like that. But I know the siblings, and of course, it's just really, really sad. My
Oh,
heart, when I was really sad to hear when I
absolutely.
saw that.
That was a blow. And of course, he's survived by his wife, Doctor,
Yeah,
Ashley Campbell, and his lovely children.
yeah.
And of course his family. I mean, just a
Oh,
huge
his
family,
parents,
prominent in Adventism. Dad is a pastor, brother's a pastor.
yeah.
Just an awesome family.
Everybody
So,
loves the Campbells, and I didn't
yeah.
know I didn't know they were in Southern California. I didn't know that they've
We're in
died.
Southern
Yeah.
California.
Mm.
I was on a WhatsApp group with him, Eric Walsh, and another friend, Derek Rose, and yeah, it was so much fun to watch him and Eric banter about you name it, you name it.
Right.
Pete
Yeah.
could be kind of just he had an encyclopedic grasp on so many different things.
Mm.
So just real sad. Just
Very sad.
when I talk about loss and grief and how it can hurt you.
Yeah.
So couldn't help but think about that. So sincerest condolences to the family.
Sincere. Yeah.
Um, so the death of a loved one, divorce, the end of a significant relationship, these are all things that can trigger a depressive, episode.
Mhm.
Um, Especially when a person's having a difficult time processing the grief. So the question becomes, okay, well, when is it moving over into the realm of clinical depression?
Mhm.
And again, the guiding light is function. How much is function disrupted, especially, and how long is this duration? Because everyone would expect that for a period after you've sustained loss, and if you're having grief, you're going to have a period of time where you're not going to be the same, and you'll see people take time off from work,
Yeah.
and we as a society, we allow for that. Even as friends, we allow for that.
Mhm.
So the issue really and truly becomes after the expected time has elapsed, but the level of function has not come back to baseline.
Mhm. Right.
Now is when you're thinking, I mean, so it's one thing for grief to last for a month, but when it's 6 months, 9 months, and you're having a severe inability to function, maybe you're not getting out of bed, you're not attending to your activities of daily living. Now we've got an issue. Now this is
Right.
something more that we have to look into. So that's when it becomes okay. Well, would a therapist be helpful? Would a psychiatrist be helpful? And how aggressively do we need to address this
Mhm.
to make the interventions to get you to restore function? What were you going to say, sis?
I was just gonna say, when there's grief involved and someone has just lost a loved one or a friend, like we were just talking about with the Campbell family, and you people that were, if you've lost someone, I always right off the bat suggest get into grief therapy, specifically grief therapy. That is my encouragement to anyone. Um, it's just helpful. It's helpful even if you're not in even if it hasn't been a month and you're able to function and do those things. It's helpful to be able to talk to someone to process those emotions as you are grieving. It's extremely helpful.
And let me ask you a silly question.
Okay.
Why? Why is that?
Because there's they help with perspective, but truly a therapist in those first beginning steps of doing grief therapy, they're really just going to be that empathetic person that's going to sit there and listen, and just as you get a little bit stronger, help you to see some positive perspective and little change of mind things about the loss. Like, it's always going to be the loss. You're always going to miss that person. You're always going to love them and wish they were here. But they can help you to start to turn that corner, I believe, a little bit sooner if you're just trying to deal with it on your own.
100%. I just wanted you to say, I know it almost feels like saying the obvious, but
Mhm.
100%. I think that thanks to television, have you ever watched a show where you're watching these characters just say the perfect statement? They
Mhm.
just know exactly what to say and it just lands really well. And you get so our expectation at times can be that people are going to say the absolute right thing. That's not how reality works.
It's not.
Like you talk, that's like script writers. And sometimes they even go so far as to consult a person with expertise. And so now you're watching this normal person behave in ways that actually it's a professional that would be speaking that way, but you think it's just normal.
Right.
And so, what a therapist will do, like you were saying, Sister Tante, is they will actually provide a setting where
Mhm.
they've gotten formal training to understand when should you speak and when should you really be quiet.
Just let the silence sit for a
How
while.
how
Yeah.
how do you how important is it to sit with your discomfort and not feel like you need to have that person adjust themselves in order to make you more comfortable? So
Right.
it doesn't just happen naturally. And so that's why we champion get the help that you need. I'm always also very intrigued by how complicated this life is with the ups and the downs and the changes, and people don't expect that they're going to benefit from getting professional support to deal with the changes of life,
Right.
which can just be so overwhelming. Now we have Veronica. Veronica, we're gonna have to start shouting out Veronica the way we shout out Clint,
Yeah,
because
Veronica and
Veronica,
Clint are
she
like,
be
they're
bringing it, man. She
always
be
there.
bringing
Love
it.
you both. Love you both.
We
And
now,
we
Veronica, put a one in the chat if you will be gracing us with your present at the convocation. Put a
I
one in the chat.
know. And Clint, yes, it's in Orlando, Florida. So pray about it, Clint.
Exactly, exactly. You got some time for
Yes,
God
inside.
to intervene. All
Yeah.
right, Veronica. So you asked the question, what if you never really grieved? Oh, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
What if you never really grieved because you didn't feel it was right for your spouse to comfort you over the loss of their family?
Mm.
Seen a counselor, but still felt like I didn't have the quote unquote right. I'm going to let you take a stab at that. Go ahead.
Well, Veronica, obviously you were close to your husband's family member who passed away, and so you had the absolute right to grieve. But I understand you were trying to be there for your spouse because it was. I'm sure he was grieving as well, and really, you guys were grieving. Can grieve together and can either go to individual counseling for the grief, or you could have gone to couples counseling because of the grief, or family counseling, probably more. I would be family counseling, but it's if you are feeling a loss, you can grieve. And if your husband's feeling that same loss, he can grieve too. And you can get if you went to therapy, you would be getting strong enough to help him if you felt like you needed to support him, or even help and to support each other. But if you still haven't processed it, you should be in therapy, because it's never healthy to not really allow yourself to grieve, because your body is having a reaction. You're just not processing it in your mind as grief, but your body is responding.
And sis, can you share what you would share with your clients about what grief looks like? Is there a right way to grieve?
No. Grief, I tell this story all the time. There's not, I mean, you don't want to ever, yeah, there's a wrong way. If you have a thought of hurting yourself or someone else, that's obviously the wrong way to grieve. But
Exactly.
there's really no wrong way to grieve, in the sense that everyone grieves differently. I tell you, I've said this story before, but my dad passed in February of 2021, and we were so close. And he was a basketball fanatic, and he made me a basketball fanatic. And we used to watch basketball games together, even if we weren't in the same town or house or whatever. We'd talk on the phone, call each other on the breaks, all that kind of stuff. So after he passed, I like took a deeper dive into basketball, to the point where
Wow.
my husband was like, do you have to have the game on another game on again? Like, I even bought like the NBA pass so I could see like all the games. It was like it was something there. I was
Wow.
But it made me feel close to him. It
That's
reminded me of
great.
our fun times. So that was, looking back, I know that was I was
Way of grieving.
his
That
way of
was your way
grieving.
of grieving.
Yes.
Isn't that
So,
that's so powerful? And it's just to highlight that it can take on such a diverse, picture,
mhm,
and then allowing for that, including you not doing anything overt. So it might not even seem like you're grieving. It
mhm,
might seem like you're just, I don't know, going about your normal day, and that might be grieving for some people.
right,
So in what I'm really championing there is be prepared to have some respect for a person's process, even
right,
if it doesn't meet your standard for what grief would look like.
right.
No, some people may grieve differently.
Mhm.
And they might save their tears for their pillows.
Yeah.
That's what tends to work for me. It's like
Mhm,
I want privacy
mhm,
when I'm grieving. So
yeah,
be prepared for that diversity.
yeah.
All right, Deborah, thank you so much for the question. We really appreciate it. And by the way, Veronica, I hope that was helpful to you. So, put a one in the chat if that was. Now, Deborah is asking, what about a person who likes to be alone? When dealing with grief, is that normal? And how much time should family and friends give that person before intervening? Man, that's a great question, Deborah. And, if you want like a really specific response, you can see this is where like having a therapist where you can give all the details is going to be super helpful. And that's why we always throw in the qualifier. We're not a mental health, we're not your mental health, expert. But that said, these are some guidelines. Um, Pay attention to function and pay attention to loss of function. A person being able to go to work, do their schoolwork, do their chores, maintain their hygiene. Pay attention to function and whether people can meet their obligations. If people are able to meet their obligations and their function has not deviated too far from what's baseline for them,
Right.
then so be it. So be it. So the issue becomes when you are getting protracted, extended periods where there is a significant deviation for what's normal for them. They're
Mm,
not caring for themselves. They're not able to go to work, maybe they're not able to go to school, they're not able to get out of bed, they're not attending to themselves, and this is lasting over time. That's when those are signs that intervention might be necessary. So the big word
Mhm.
in all this is disorder, a change from baseline function. And
Right.
that's what you're allowing to guide your decision making and the aggressiveness that you need to employ to intervene and help that person get back to baseline.
Mhm. And just just to tag on to that a little bit, and always doing, always checking in on them as well, because I know some, like you said, Dr. White, you like to be left alone when you're grieving. But it's, it's always good to do check-ins. And if because some people will just want to isolate themselves to a time where they shouldn't be alone anymore. They need to start just being with other people and humans again. But that time looks different for everybody. So just doing little check-ins to make sure that it hasn't gone to where they're not doing the basic needs, as Dr. White had said, and not taking care of themselves is very important.
On a quick note, how comfortable are you seeing your man cry? Or, talk about, is it safe, to cry in front of
Yeah.
your woman?
No, yes. I mean, it makes me cry if it makes me really sad if he cries. And he does. He cries. He cries in front of me, if, when he needs to, when he has to,
Well,
when he feels it. But that makes
there
me
are
really,
those.
really sad because I definitely don't like to see him cry because I know how much he's hurting if he's crying, and that hurts me really bad.
Absolutely. Well, there are those that would, it is a popular belief today that not, some people feel like women will think less of you, or your woman will think less of you if they see you cry. Now, personally, I do kind of believe you can't cry too much, right?
Well, yeah, that right.
I
They
don't
can't
think
cry too much, so that when they do cry, you're like,
it's a big deal. And
yeah, it's a
so
big deal. Yeah.
and now the flip I would say is if your man does cry in front of you, you better not make fun of that person.
Oh,
You
yeah.
better not be like indelicate and like, because that's a vulnerable, moment. So just be aware of that is all I would say. All right, what do we got here?
Producer,
Amra,
she has a great question. She
our
said,
executive producer.
is there a way to actually prepare for grief? I'm a daddy's girl, and my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's and dementia. It's not advanced yet, but the pain is already there. You've already started the process of grieving, Amber, in the sense that you're grieving. I think the pain that I believe the pain you are starting to feel is just grieving the fact that your dad's not exactly the way he used to be. And I remember you telling me stories like your dad he's a brilliant man and could do so many different things. And of course, the disease starts to take some of those things away, and that does hurt. So, but you can definitely, I would say this. You can definitely start to prepare yourself. I think just preparing ourselves and just spending as much time and just staying in reality. And I think I'll be honest. I think getting into therapy in these type of situations could be very essential as well, because you know what might be coming and what you're already feeling. And so I think that would be helpful to
I think that
anyone
was
in that situation. Go ahead.
I think that was a brilliant response, and I'm so glad I didn't interrupt you or anything like that because I wasn't even thinking about therapy. Um,
Mhm.
Amra, this is what I would say, and this is what I would say to the audience as well. Like almost like from the time you were born, it's almost like you're preparing for these moments. And
Mhm.
here's what I mean by that. When you showed your dad respect, when you showed your dad love, when you invest quality time, um, part of what you're doing is you're insulating yourself from regret, because when if we're disrespectful, if we're unloving, if we're forfeiting opportunities to really invest and bond with our loved ones, it absolutely creates these scenarios where if they should pass away, you've got these regrets and you've got this guilt, and oh my goodness, I wish I hadn't done that. And so Amra, absolutely, there are questions that you have for your dad. Ask him now, while he's still here,
Yes.
make sure you ask.
Yes.
There are things you might be wishing that you could have done. Do those things now.
Mhm.
Fast forward to the day where dad is not here and think to yourself, man, what do I wish? What is it that I would have regretted?
Mhm.
Well, now you can come back to the present and make sure that you do those things that you can anticipate you would have regretted if you didn't do them. That is part of a wonderful preparation process. But
Mhm.
I do want to highlight that this is part of the reason it is so important to be respectful to our parents.
'Cause they're
This
not
is
always
why
gonna
it's
be here.
what's that?
They're not gonna always be here.
They're not going to always be here. And those are the things that eat at you. This is
Yeah.
the reason why sometimes when you're really upset, bite your tongue. Bite
Yeah.
your tongue. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying you don't speak up for yourself because it's appropriate to speak up for yourself, but
Mhm.
don't speak up for yourself in a way where you turn around and you regret it
Right.
or you damage the relationship or you have to turn around and say, I'm sorry.
Right.
And so this is part of the preparatory process. And lastly, one of the things that we have with parents that are older is we have experiences.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think we get tired of hearing the same stories all over again, but they enjoy telling them.
Mhm.
Support that, foster
Yeah.
that. Hey, dad, tell me that story about that time where you did X, Y, or Z, or tell me what it was like when you X, Y, or Z. You know those stories that they cannot say enough and they love saying them. Tell me them. And then this is also a good chance to elicit history that when they die, that history goes with them potentially. Who
Mhm.
was your mom? Who was your dad? What are
Mhm.
your regrets? What do you think you've done differently? What special word do you want to make sure you share with me before you leave this earth? Like, these are good things to prepare you for the time where they're not here. And the good news is, the better you do this, the
Mhm.
more your dad will always be with you.
Yes.
The better you internalize your dad, the
Mhm.
more those memories will be available to you to
Mhm.
comfort you during moments where they're no longer here physically.
Yeah. Yeah, everything you said, agree to that totally. Just Amber, you're actually blessed in the sense that it's a slower, it's a slower process. I mean, when my father died, it was unexpected. And so I had what 3 weeks in the hospital, and then he was gone. But what I hold on to is that we did have such a close relationship, and like I talked to him almost. He would be the first one to call me every morning. Like he just
Wow.
yeah, we just talked all the time. So I'm thankful that I had such a great life and relationship with him, so that when that happened so quickly, I did not regret anything. I knew I had done. He lived with us for 6 years too after he retired, so we spent a lot of time together, even as I was an adult and stuff like that. But back to you, Amory, you were, now this, like Dr. White says, this is the time that you can, talk to him, ask questions. Just you have this time to prepare, but just to spend time with him still, and it can be a really blessing that it's not so fast. It's not so
Would,
quick.
would your dad call you even when you were in college, like every day?
College. College was a long time ago. I feel like in college he didn't call me every day. That's when Daddy worked a lot. Like he worked double shifts, so like he could pay for our college.
Yeah, well, good, good. I feel better now then. I feel better now because
That's okay.
my daughter will barely take my calls, so I feel a little better now.
That's funny. But definitely as after college, after he retired, oh, he was like, I think he had more time. So he was calling me all the time. He was calling the grandkids he had 8 grandchildren, so he called them all the time. At that time, I think he had 7 grandchildren. But anyways, he was a talker too. He was a talker. He loved to talk.
No,
So
but that's
that's where I get it from. I'm a talker too.
no, that's beautiful though that he fostered that. Sets a good example for me. I got to step my game up.
Yeah, call
We
her.
got Clint coming in with a fire question. All right. How do we determine healthy responses to grief? Meaning, What are healthy versus unhealthy responses of grief? I would imagine responses vary. Clint, that is an absolutely fantastic question. And there are many directions to take this question. One of the most common one of the most common ways of coping poorly with grief is utilizing substances, in particular recreational substances.
Yeah.
So when I worked in chemical dependency at Loma Linda, one of the interesting things I would observe is I would observe people admit to our chemical dependency unit, right? And when they came out of the detox, right, they would grieve a person that died as if the death had happened the day prior, let's say, right? And you'd be like, hey, when did the person die? Maybe a year prior. But what they'll explain is they maybe just started drinking so much, it's almost like they put off the grief, which is right there waiting for them once they give up those substances, right? And so one of the poor ways of grieving is settling for counterfeits. Um, Clint, one of the things that can happen with grief is you can misuse the energy of that pain. So grief can give you massive energy. And the question will be, what will you do with that energy? And so some people they'll destroy themselves with all that energy. You'll see them whether making poor decisions as it relates to maybe sex, or poor decisions in terms of developing an addiction, whether to recreational substances or whether the food, or developing maybe bad habits, all because they're trying to do something with that energy. Okay, so those would be the negative things you could do with that grief energy. And the positive things you can do with that grief energy is you could build something beautiful. You could
Yes.
build something beautiful. You could harness that energy and you could actually do something that is a tribute to that loved one. You actually could commit yourself to recovery in honor of that person. You could actually say, I'm not going to drink in honor of this person.
Mhm.
You could say, I'm going to actually, you know what? I'm going to enhance my physique in honor of that person.
Mhm.
And this is a big one, Clint. This is a really big one. When you review the relationship with that person, you may have areas where you regret, right? And so now you have this grief and you've got the temptation to now focus on this grief. And what that grief could remind you to do is you might say, you know what? The mistake I made of not being present with that loved one, I'm not going to perpetuate that mistake with the people who are still alive.
Mm.
That's an opportunity. You can let that grief remind you of that. That would be healthy grieving.
Mhm.
And another aspect of healthy grieving is actually getting it out and really getting acquainted with why is this hurting me? Oh, this is
Right.
hurting me for this reason, and this is hurting me for this reason. And this is where a therapeutic setting can be so helpful, where the sole agenda of that setting and that context is allowing you to emote, allowing you to talk out your feelings, allowing you to cathart. It's like
Mhm.
emotionally cleansing yourself. Yeah. So you go to a lot of settings, and especially unprofessional settings, and people would be like, don't worry about that. That's going to pass. Or people can say some really ignorant things in an
Right.
effort to comfort you, when in fact it's hurting more than it's helping.
Mhm.
Well, in a professional context, a lot of times they have the training to support your healing. Clint, those are just a few of my examples of
Mhm.
how it can be negative, and then again, how it can actually be positive.
Mhm. Right. Just to piggyback on what you said at the end there, like even when people are trained therapists, they will tend to again say less during a grief session or when they're dealing with somebody who's grieving because you know when someone is grieving, the words to say are very hard to come by. And so even in a grief session, you will, I mean, I know for myself personally, like I'm listening, I'm providing empathy, and there are just certain when I get that opportunity, to inject something that needs to be said, then I will do that. But it's a slower process. It's a slower process. You don't have to have all the words or have all this is what's going to help. Like it's better to say less because you're probably going to say something that's not going to help.
One of my favorite interventions is I don't even have the words.
Yeah.
I don't
I've said that before too.
I don't even have the words for this. Like one of the myths is that you have to come up with the right word.
You
And
don't.
it's like, no, what you really have to do is sit with the discomfort in the situation.
And
I'm
that's what
just going to be
empathy
with
is.
you in this process,
That's what real empathy is. You're just sitting with the
with the
person and
person.
you're feeling them. You're feeling their
You're
pain.
feeling them. Sometimes it's, there's some, you can place a hand on the shoulder and you can, sometimes if it's appropriate for you, you
Right.
can, they can be held in an embrace. Again, as presuming that's appropriate.
Right.
But you're just being there in the space,
Yeah.
whether it's my wife or my daughter. I know my daughter is high touch. So it's just, it's like if she can just cry on your shoulder, on my shoulder, I'm the only shoulder that she needs to cry on besides her mom, by the way. But anyway, I'm joking. But yeah, she can just cry on your shoulder and that's meaningful, to her.
Yeah.
So I hope that was helpful, Clint.
Yeah. And Sharice, I think what we just answered, I think should cover your question. It just
So
popped up.
Sarita Johnson,
Okay.
is connectivity of common interests and functions is truly a mental passage through the grief spectrum? Is connectivity of common interests and functions is truly a mental passage? So I'm gonna do a little interpreting, Sarita. Give me a little poetic license here to kind of tell you what I got from your question. What I got from your question is at least the answer it inspires is common interests can absolutely be a tool to support a person through their grieving. So take, for example, Sister Atonte mentioning that she was grieving her father by indulging in basketball games. I don't think she was really into the statistics all that much. It was just the experience of feeling closer. Unless of course it had to do with Stephen Curry, then it was,
I was about to say, yeah. And the
we
Warriors.
already know. But now to drive home your point, Sarita, this would have been a wonderful time for Pastor Myers to say, okay, well let me develop some interest in basketball, just to get that common interest, and now he can sit with her,
Yeah.
during that time as well. So that's where I can see common interest functioning to support a grief process. But then you mentioned the grief spectrum. And so now this brings me to, oh, I'm not going to think of her name right now. Let's see, the psychiatrist who talked about the stages of grief,
Um, last Ross. Wait. Oh, you're making
Kubler-Ross.
Yeah. The last is Ross is the last name, but go ahead and answer.
Yeah, but anyway, the
I'll
stages of,
Google. Well,
yeah, exactly. We could be
Ross.
shameless now. Kubler-Ross. Anyway, the stages of grief. And so now you talk about through the grief spectrum. So what people often talk about is going through these various stages of grief. So whether it's the anger or the denial or, what have you. But we also know that
Ross, you were right.
yeah.
Ross, yes.
But what we know is people are going to go through it in different ways. Some people get the denial up front. Other people, they'll get denial at the end. And so the research has basically shown that there isn't a one size fits all, and it's not necessarily chronological. So that's the best I can do with that question, Sarita. Thank you so much for the question. All right. And then
I feel
Sharice
like we
Finley.
answered this. How do you deal with someone who's grieving? I think when we talked about the empathy and sitting, and
100%.
feeling their pain
Absolutely.
is really covering. We covered that
And,
question.
and and I'll just say, please don't let your experience eclipse the person who's grieving experience. And I think so often we can get so focused on our feeling, like I feel like, and I don't know, and just notice how much you're saying I.
Right.
And that's really taking the focus off of them. Like yeah, like when you go to a funeral, and sometimes like you're tearing up, and if you really paid attention to why you're tearing up, it has more to do with you, and it like evoking or eliciting a memory of something that has more to do with you than what was going on actually at the funeral. But the idea just being monitoring that so that you can be present for that person that's grieving, and the attention can really be on
Mhm.
helping them get comfort rather than you making it more about yourself.
Mhm.
Um, all right. How do you deal with a person who uses grieving as an excuse to be mean and dismissive to others? Well, this kind of goes back to when we were talking about like their like how will you use the energy of your grief?
Mhm.
Will you use the energy of your grief to build something beautiful, or maybe to destroy? And I think you really just have to use some common sense, giving people some space, because I assure you, as I think about losing some of my loved ones, I would not necessarily be giving the biggest priority to being loving, caring, perhaps even polite. Um, I would be in a space where I yeah, I just that wouldn't be top of mind. Like your
Mhm.
feelings would not be my top of mind priorities if I was in that kind of space. Just to be honest, but so I think giving people some space. Obviously, at some point, it becomes more toxicity than just a person needing some space. So that might be one that you might go to your therapist and outline the specific situation so they can give you some specific recommendations.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That needs, yeah, there we need more detail, but I will just say, um, depending on the situation, if this has just happened and the person is just in shock and their whole world has been turned upside down or whatever the case may be, you might, you, you can find it in yourself to extend more grace to them because they're just beginning this process of grieving. If this has gone on for quite a
Months.
while, yeah, for months and it's quite a while, then they need to be just left alone. And then a boundary, I believe, should be set to protect you from that type of behavior, but also again to still, you don't have to respond in the way that they are treating you, but you do need to set a boundary to protect yourself. And they should, be left alone until they are in a space where they can respect and treat people accordingly. But that just really a therapist, you could talk to a therapist and have more detail about what's really going on. But that's again, if it's been for a while,
Yeah.
if it's been for a while.
Okay. Shout out Michelle B. Thank you so much for this phenomenal question. So you said, I've lost two siblings before either of my parents had died. Sincerest condolences to you, Michelle. Now both my parents are gone, and the world feels so huge now. Oh my goodness, my
Mhm.
heart goes out to you. I feel so alone as a result. Um, I definitely want to say sincerest condolences to you. And this is the reason God is so passionate about remaking this earth, because He didn't make us for loss, He made us for community. And
Mhm.
so, Michelle, this is really tragic. And again, I would definitely, if I were you, be looking at, hey, let me get myself into the care of a counselor or a therapist. That said, um, one of the things I would encourage you to do, Michelle, is um, you have been able to document the loss. Now I would ask and challenge you to document some gain. What I
Mm,
mean by that is over the time frame of this loss that you've described, there have been some births in your family. There have been some gains. There are people that have come into your life. One of the things that we don't want loss to do is that it eclipses the fact that there are people who will come into our lives.
mm,
Life is not static, it's ever changing. And scripture tells us that the world is good and evil. What the devil would hope that we get convinced of is that it's all evil. And that's a deception. That's never the
mm,
case. So, where there's loss, with some careful review, we'll see that there are some gains. There are some people that have been born. There are some people that have come into your life. And it's important that those things then be nurtured, especially if they're healthy relationships, they're nurtured.
mhm,
Because in a sense, it's not like they can replace it, but it's just the natural balance of life. Do not let loss eclipse gain, because it's a tragedy that one's consciousness would not be present to appreciate new life.
mhm, mhm. Yes.
Now, and Michelle, I need you to tell me if that was helpful or not. Tell me if that feedback was helpful.
Let's see. Veronica says, one thing I've learned with so much loss is that I appreciate anything anyone offered as comfort. Because even, did I read that right? Let's see. With so much, okay. And that okay. Okay, offered as comfort, cause even having gone through loss, I still don't know what to say to people when they lose someone. You know what, Veronica, even as a therapist, especially I can tell you the hardest, and maybe Dr. White, you tell me if you agree, maybe you don't, but I would say a client that wants therapy for grief or they've lost someone is, for me, one of the hardest cl- the clients. Like I have empathy for them, but it takes a lot of work, or just to make sure that you're present and saying the right thing. Like I said, I say less in those sessions to make, because again, I'm trying to be as present and empathetic as possible and just hear and listen. And they will gain so much from that. They'll come and say, oh, thank you, it's helped me so much. And sometimes I'll be like, well, I might have made 4 or 5 different comments in a 50-minute session. You know what I mean? I won't feel like I said so much, but just being able, they can feel your empathy, and just for them to be able to talk it out, and to just be in a safe space is all they really need to begin to figure this grief situation out. I have to tell you, I have a current client that I'm experiencing that with right now. And I mean, the grief is so much. Like her son committed suicide 2 years ago. Like right after that, maybe let's see, maybe a year after the son committed suicide, the mom died. 6 months after that, the father died. Like, guys, that's a lot of grief. No, I mean, and then the husband just left her. I mean, there were just 4 different hits like that. Just so. Yeah, it's a lot. But again, I'm just trying to be present and be empathetic for her and help her to work through this process. And as a friend, you need to just be in that empathetic space.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say this enough. The biggest myth is that you have to say the right word.
Yeah.
When in fact, the real heavy lifting, as you just said, Sister Tante, is giving them the space to be heard.
Yes.
That's the heavy lifting of good therapy, is giving the person the space to be heard. I call it facilitating an emotional bowel movement, right? It's
Wow.
like, you know what I'm saying?
I have never heard that before, but I didn't know that you were going to just say that. But wow, I get it. Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, that's what you're kind of facilitating. It's
Okay.
like you will it's like people have this thing to get out of them. And I say bowel because it's visceral, it's
I
deep.
get it.
And
Mhm.
you gotta just sit there and give them the space.
Thanks. Yeah.
And that doesn't really come from a lot of speaking, because your goal is that you want them to do the speaking. And the speaking will almost always be just the right thing because you've given it so much space and you've really made the priority to hear them. You do a good job hearing, and they will give you the words they need you to say to them. If you listen carefully enough. Now, obviously, this is what trained therapists do. So never feel like you need to be a trained therapist. Sometimes it's get
Right.
them into the right setting. But my point just being, it's a myth that I got to come up with the right words. The truth is, I got to give you the space to be heard and to let you give me the words that you really need me to give back to you. So that's how I would say that.
Okay. This is a good question. How would you deal with a parent who lost their spouse of 63 years who is codependent on their adult child and going on 6 years and counting to the point of being too sick to be independent?
So, like, you can see the complex nature of this case. So we've got a parent who suffered loss, and there's codependency. Now, when you say codependent, for us, when you use the word codependent, for me, codependent is a person having a relationship in which they're trying to do for that person what that person needs to do for themselves. So the word enmeshment comes to mind when I hear that word codependent, but it's a prominent term that we see in addictions, for example. So they've had loss, then they are having these kind of codependent issues, um, and let's see, to the point of being sick, to be independent. So now you're also bringing an illness. Maybe there's a medical component. And so this screams, you know what, professionals would need to step in here, and kind of tease things out and deal with the layers of complexity, so that healing can be shined into that situation. So this really would call for some professional help, given the complicated nature, the layered and textured nature of this issue. There's a lot going on in that, Alexandria, and my hope is that you'd be able to get some support, some professional support to deal with those multi-layered issues.
No, for sure. When my stepfather passed away, my mom lost him in 2018. I mean, God was good. I mean, I just led her to. I had just learned about Grief Share, but I sent her to Grief Share, and that was just a major help to her in grieving, and just because she had never been alone like that, and she was about to be alone, and I mean, we were there for her as children, but not having a spouse anymore and just learning how to do that. But then after that, there was even a need for more counseling. So I think the 63-year-old parent, they're needing some professional help to not be codependent on their child. I think that's what.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think we have time to take one. If there was one, I don't think. Okay, maybe we're out of questions, comments. I think so. I think so. But yeah, that was great. That was great, guys. For helping us to do this program. Um,
Absolutely.
we were. I don't know. Were we planning to do grief? Like,
No,
I
no,
mean,
no, no. What
it
above
was,
grief was
it was the
trauma
next.
or abuse. Then there was
Okay.
loss and grief, and now next week, I guess we can go into stressful life events and the role
Yes.
it can play on depression.
Let's. And I
Yeah.
meant to say that, God pulled all that together because I didn't review the notes to be like, what was next? Because they had given us so many questions last time. I wasn't sure where we were, but that was great. That was great.
Absolutely.
And you guys
That's
definitely, thank you again for hosting with us because you make the program work, and it's truly a blessing to have all of you. And please share this program again on your social media. Share it with someone who has gone that is grieving right now, or and you know what's appropriate though. I mean, shove it down anyone's throat that's not
Yeah.
prepared for
Yeah.
it. But if
Awesome.
you think they're ready and would be blessed by it, definitely share this program and bring somebody back with you next week as we
Absolutely.
will be continuing our discussion on depression. So we hope you have a good evening and we will see you next week. God bless you.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
Dr. Wright.
All the
Bye-bye.
best. Always a pleasure, Doc.